Hello, everyone. My name is Gus.
Hi, I'm Woody.
Today, we're going to finally react to one of the most requested opinions from us over the last, I don't know, 2 years, I would say. And it's about Linnea Mills, who was a student, a diver who died during a training class. So she was taking a class and unfortunately had a terrible death. Now, we've made it, and we know this is to our detriment, I would say. We have made a point to not be the first ones reacting to every tragedy. I feel like there's a lot of channels that are like as soon as something happens, like that submarine that imploded underwater or the yacht that just sank and everyone died on board in Italy or whatever, like they immediately, like they're just stumbling to put something out there. I get it. You're searching for clicks. Everyone is on YouTube trying to find content about the latest tragedy. We have gone the opposite way. Like I said, to our detriment. We kind of wait for the investigations to complete. We kind of wait if there's a lawsuit in place. Let's wait until that plays out. Let's get as many facts as possible so then we can provide an opinion that is based on facts and not on, oh, I bet this happened and I bet she did whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yep, I do know what you're saying. This one's a tough one. I'm going to talk about, I'm a Drysuit instructor.
Mm-hmm.
This is a incident that happened as it relates to her first experience in a Drysuit with an instructor.
Right.
The only thing I want to set this up with, and then we'll start the video, is that a Drysuit, although it can be a specialty gear used in your very first class, is a specialty gear. And it is substantially different.
Yeah.
Has different risk, different emergency drills, different total use than a wetsuit. Therefore, it absolutely does need training and certification by somebody who is a specialty instructor in that gear. This is my opinion.
Yeah.
But you're a Drysuit diver. Imagine, just take yourself back, everybody that's divers, Drysuit divers or viewers, that you've never, ever in your entire life even put a Drysuit on.
Yeah.
You're not, in my opinion, you should not be expected. I don't know. Okay, I'm in it. Well, do I just go underwater?
Yeah.
I'm setting that up because that is going to be my perspective throughout this video.
Right. So let's watch, because they'll cover the incident and then we'll add our own comments and expertise into this one. And by the way, before we start, we're probably going to talk a lot on this one. So I don't know how long this video is that we're reacting to. Woody and I haven't watched it, but whatever the length is, we're probably going to talk triple. Because there's a lot for us to dig in and talk about and discuss on this one. What went wrong?
I think the name of our channel is Dive Talk.
Yeah, I think so. All right, let's give it a shot.
Linnea Mills starts an advanced diving course that ends her life. But how can a diver go from learning advanced skills to dying in a matter of one dive under the supervision of 2 diving instructors?
Insane.
PADI stands for the Professional Association of Diving Instructors. It's a leading international organization responsible for setting and maintaining diving standards across the globe. PADI was set up in 1966. It's quickly grown to become the most recognized and respected scuba diving certification agency in the world. It has a network of over 6,600 dive centers and resorts and provides the framework for divers to follow safety protocols, adhere to best practices, and respect the underwater environment.
By the way, this is AI that generated this video, I'm pretty sure, like with the scenes, and that's great.
Oh, the scenes.
But I like that. I think
the narrator
AI,
is real.
No doubt. But by the way, no problem. I actually think it does a good job.
Yeah. I will say, though, that he made a comment.
I'm using it myself.
He made a comment about PADI being the most respected agency in the world. I would say that that's kind of a dual approach to it. Number one is, I think that in terms of size and presence in the industry, PADI is the most respected agency in the world. They're the biggest, by far. However, I think it's very common, and this non-divers don't know this, but for divers, I think it's very common to know that if you have a PADI certification, like people take it with a grain of salt. And the main reason for that, and I'm going to just say this myself, so I'm the only one that has been thrown under the
Well,
bus.
I'm going to chime in.
Okay.
I don't have the same opinion.
I think that the reason for that is that in order for PADI to explode and their mission to be the biggest and baddest out there, they kind of aggressively pursued instructors, onboarding instructors, and I think that what that does is that it pushes the quality down in a lot of ways. Are there great PADI instructors? Of course. You're a PADI instructor. You're a great instructor. But are there pretty bad instructors, PADI instructors? Well, we're about to watch a video of a PADI instructor that is the complete opposite of a quality instructor, right?
First of all, I'm glad that you're going to get those hate comments, right?
Bring it.
Listen, I happen to think PADI is amazing. And I'm also an instructor for many other dive agencies. Let me tell you why. PADI grew diving. PADI brings people into diving. PADI is not necessarily saying, I'm going to take you to a CCR rebreather DPV cave diver. PADI has a progress. They have a track with specialty classes.
Right.
And they are fantastic, along with some other agencies, SSI, for example, of bringing people into diving. Now, when you bring people into diving, that means they have zero experience in diving whatsoever.
Right. They're brand new.
And if you are going to then have specialty gear introduced at that very early level, PADI did write really good materials to be taught properly to somebody that's using that specialty equipment. There were, I think the video said there were 2 instructors. Is this really anything we should be knocking PADI over?
Well, that's the question.
Let me ask, should we be knocking PADI over this?
Yes.
Or should we, because how would PADI know? I'm asking.
I'll answer.
That she went with 2 instructors in a dry suit that didn't teach her dry suit and didn't have a dry suit specialty. How would they know that occurred until after it happened?
Well, because they have to have a system in place to maintain quality high, or accept that your quality assurance systems are terrible and allow for instructors that have students die during a regular class in open water.
I get that. They do have quality assurance, but I'm asking it in a little bit of a different way. How would they know on any given day that 2 of their instructors that did not have a dry suit specialty and a student went out and purchased a dry suit, and these 2 instructors said, that's fine, it's no big deal, you can wear that and it'll be fine. How would they know right at that moment that happened? And
they cannot
let's
know.
roll it. They cannot know.
No. But I just wanted to mention.
I don't think PADI. I think PADI is a world-class organization.
Well, again, they don't teach classes. PADI doesn't teach classes. The people teaching classes are the instructors, right? So PADI is a respected agency. Of course, they're the biggest. But it's all about the instructors. And we talked about this our very first episode. By the way, for those of you who don't even know that we started as a podcast, if you search for Dive Talk in podcasts, our very first episode ever, which is from like 2019 or something like that,
memory, Gus.
was about dive agencies. And we talked about the fact that agencies are not as relevant as the instructor that you get, right?
Yes.
So at the end of the day, PADI wrote the materials and they grew and whatever, but they don't teach classes. The instructors teach classes. And if you don't have a system that enforces high quality instruction and from the shop level as well, because at the end of the day, whoever enforces the quality of instruction and connecting to the standards and attaining the standards is the shops themselves. So if you don't have that level of quality and enforcement, then what are you doing? That's why you're liable, in my opinion. Anyway, let's play it on because we're like 10 seconds in.
PADI sets standards for training, equipment use, and dive operations to ensure the safety of both recreational and professional divers.
Right.
They certify divers at various levels, ranging from beginners to experienced instructors. One dive center under the PADI umbrella is Gulf Dive in Missoula.
Whoa, look at that. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. That's cool. Like a Y thing? I've never seen a Y thing like that. Huh.
Montana. But dive centers aren't owned and operated by PADI. Instead, they're members who pay a licensing fee to use the PADI name and training standards. PADI then certifies a student who's met the standards on a training course conducted by a PADI certified dive instructor. Gulf Dive offers courses from novice to experienced divers. Qualifying dives are completed at lakes around Montana, including Lake Seeley, 1 hour from Missoula, and Lake McDonald, a 3-hour drive from the dive center. Lake McDonald is the largest lake in Glacier National Park. It's about 10 miles long, over a mile wide.
You know, in this type of water, not only would you have to wear a dry suit, because a dry suit simply is a material with rubber seals of some form of, or whatever kind of seals they have, that prevents water from coming in. Under it, you need to wear thermal protection. In this water, I'm wearing a full undergarment with a heater.
Yep.
Right? So there's a lot of specialty gear. Now you're dealing with not only the fact that you have a dry suit, but very freezing cold temperatures, which, you know, can affect many other things, as well as thick undergarments with a heater. Now you have a whole different weighting issue. I don't know where we're going with this, but this person's going to need appropriate weighting.
Yeah.
Not too much weighting.
Right.
Appropriate weighting. A whole nother aspect.
Right.
A whole different way of doing a weight check. There's a different weight check for a dry suit than there is for a wetsuit.
Yeah.
Was all that covered in her first dive? I don't know.
Let's find out.
472 feet deep and lies at an elevation of 3,100 feet. It's known for its deep, crystal clear water, making it an ideal dive site for advanced divers.
So now it has altitude. I'm just adding the complexities here. Anything above 1,000, I think, don't shoot me, I think anything considered above 1,000 feet is an altitude dive as well.
All right.
I assume that was all covered, probably.
Sure.
Not with her.
And that's one of the reasons Linnea Mills is taking her advanced diving course with Gull Dive Center. Linnea already knows she wants to be a marine biologist. Diving in diverse environments will be a big part of her career. On a family holiday to Australia in 2018, Linnea dives in the warm, clear waters of the Great Barrier Reef. She loves the underwater world and even volunteers on marine biology projects with the University of North Carolina. One of the biggest differences between the Great Barrier Reef and Glacier National Park is the temperature of the water. While the Great Barrier Reef is often above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, Lake McDonald is formed from glacial runoff with temperatures below 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit.
Dang.
That's where having a dry suit is important. Dry suits are specialized items of diving equipment designed to keep you warm and dry in cold water environments. A dry suit is different from a wetsuit. A wetsuit traps a small layer of water between your body and the suit. Your body temperature warms that layer of water. But that layer of water moves with the movement of your body. Some of that water might escape and be replenished with cold water, which means that your body needs to heat any fresh water coming into the suit. And water draws heat away from your body far quicker than air. A dry suit, on the other hand, traps a layer of air between your body and the suit. Air doesn't draw heat from your body nearly as quickly as water, so you stay warmer for longer.
Okay, I have to stop it there.
Right.
This is a massive difference.
Right.
Because now we're adding air inside the dry suit. What does that do to your buoyancy? And do you keep the valve open and let the air out? How much air do you add? And what if that's not working and you can't add air in the dry suit and it's broken?
Yeah.
Or what if you add air in the dry suit
What if it's out
and
of
it all
control?
goes to your feet and shoots you to the surface?
Yeah.
I mean, this is what I'm trying to explain. Do you see how many additional potential emergency and problems we added by putting somebody brand new who was used to diving in 80-degree water into a glacier water lake with a dry suit, with undergarments, with all kinds of different situations, not to mention their buoyancy is completely different now, right? Because are they going to control their buoyancy from the BC, from the dry suit, from both? By the way, that could be a whole video, and I'm not opening it up. It's got to be from the dry suit. It's got to be. I don't care. My point is,
it's on Dive Talk Plus, by the way. We talked about it.
We have to learn it. That's all I'm saying. We have a lot to learn.
Yes.
When diving with a dry suit, that is substantially different than a wetsuit. That's all I'm trying to illustrate.
For the people who are not divers and watching this video, I'm just going to explain something quickly that I personally thought, we probably thought the same way. So I remember watching in like the early 2000s, there's this documentary who came out about Butts Class 236. Butts is basic underwater demolition SEAL training. So like they embedded with the SEAL candidates, and they were going through this class, and they film every stage of the way, like the whole thing. And one of the things I remember watching, again, early 2000s, like diving wasn't even in my mind, was they are going into the water and complaining how cold it was. They were like, this water just kills you. Like, it makes people quit. It's that bad. And they said the water temperature was 55 degrees. Now, I remember watching that and being like, what? 55 degrees is nothing. And the reason for that is, like, if I had a superpower, like, I don't know what your superpower is, but if I had a superpower, so like, I happen to be impervious to cold weather. For some reason, I can have a t-shirt in like 35 degrees. Like, for some reason, cold doesn't affect me as much. And it's not like, oh, it's because you have all these layers of bioprene, as I call it, right? It's not that. It's like, I remember even when I used to play water polo and swim or whatever, I was just good in cold weather. Like, for some reason, it doesn't bother me, right? Heat is my weakness. So, like, I hate the heat. But anyway, point is, when you hear something like 55 degrees, which for me is t-shirts and shorts weather, I'm like, why are these people complaining? The problem is the water temperature is, like, I don't know what the X is. 2X, 3X, whatever.
20 to 25 times faster.
It takes heat away from you.
You lose your body heat in water than you do in air. 20 to 25 times.
But what I'm saying is 55 degree water, what I'm trying to say is, what would that be the equivalent of air temperature? Like, if you're in 60 degree water, it will feel like if you're in 30. Like, I don't know what
10 below zero.
I don't know what it is. But the point is, 70 degrees, okay, in the air is like, dude, go to the beach and like suntan. In the water is freezing. It's cold, dude.
72 degrees is the normal temperature of the Florida Springs.
And it's cold.
In a wetsuit, I would say, for me, I could last...
Well, you are...
I mean, I could probably make it without shivering, starting to shiver underwater. I could probably go 4 to 5 minutes. I think,
you
in
can
a 5 mil.
Like right now, you're wearing a short sleeve t-shirt, which is odd for you. You never wear.
Well, I just happened. I actually, it's.
But here in the room is 71 degrees. I'm looking at it behind you.
Cold,
and it feels great. But 71 degree water, you wearing this, you would be dead. So the point is, what I'm saying is, the importance of understanding wetsuits and dry suits is that dry suits are designed to keep you dry. And the idea is that if you're in 70 degree water, now it will feel like you're in 70 degree air. So you can wear under the dry suit what you would wear if it was 70 degrees out. So like when I'm diving in the springs that is 72, I have one layer, just one layer below the dry suit, and that's it.
Wow.
That's good enough for me. I don't need anything more. If you're in 70 degrees, the kind of guy who would wear 2 layers, 3 layers, then you would wear that under your dry suit and you will be fine. That's what I'm trying to say here. That is the difference between a wetsuit and a dry suit. The dry suit doesn't keep you warm. The layers you wear under the dry suit is what keeps you warm.
You can also wear warmer clothes under your dry suit because they'll stay dry. That provides a layer of insulation which keeps your body even warmer. But despite their benefits, dry suits also introduce risks that divers need to be aware of and trained to manage.
Exactly.
Air is compressed under pressure. That means as you descend, the air that's keeping you warm is compressed. The deeper you go, the more that airspace is compressed. To compensate for that air being compressed, you have to put more air into the suit.
Exactly.
Dry suits have an inflator valve which is connected to your air supply. Simply press a button and air is pumped from your tank into your dry suit. That balances the volume of air in the suit. But it also introduces another risk. As you ascend, that air you put into your suit will start to expand as the pressure decreases. So on your way up, you have to release some air. If you don't, the dry suit will start to act like a balloon and pull you rapidly up to the surface.
Right. That is
so
great.
a dry suit has a dump valve to release the air as it expands.
On your arm, yeah.
When diving with a dry suit, you need to understand how this works and practice balancing the air in your suit.
Yes.
Paddy offers a dry suit specialty course to help you get started with a dry suit.
And other agencies too. By the way, that valve on the shoulder is what we call a mushroom valve. It's a one-way valve, so water doesn't go in, but air goes out. So you can leave it open the whole dive. As a matter of fact, I always leave it open the whole dive, and many divers do this. It's not unique. And no water goes in. So it's a one-way valve. The other thing I wanted to mention is, I'm sure you get this question too from new divers. It's like, hey, I'm going to the Springs. What do you think I should wear? 3 mil? You think 3 mil is okay? Or should I do a bathing suit? It's like, no, wear the warmest thing you own.
Yeah, you're going to freeze.
Yeah, because rarely in the water, especially with wetsuits, rarely in the water you'll be too hot. I mean, like you can be in Florida, 80 degrees, like they were saying, like super warm. You jump in with a 7 mil, like the thickest wetsuit you can get, and you'll be okay. Like you're not going to come out and be like, I'm dying. This is too hot. You're going to be fine. So even super thick suits in warm water, we're fine.
Linnea's first dive on her advanced open water course is at Lake Sealy. She hires a wetsuit and equipment from Gull Dive. The icy lake water is so cold that another student decides not to dive and gives Linnea her wetsuit for the dive so that she can double up and stay a little bit warmer.
Dude, a couple of weeks ago, I got into sea otter at the aquarium. Freezing. Like I was dying. It was so cold. Because
I've only been able to do it a few times because I shiver under there, and you don't dive in a dry suit there. They use
it's all wetsuits.
They use that thick 7 mil.
Yeah,
you're down at the bottom trying to scrub. It's freezing.
My God,
I think it's like 52, 55 degrees. It's similar actually to this temperature, isn't it? So
no. It's like 60. It's cold.
It's cold.
It's just cold, and you go in there and you're like, okay, well. In theory, you're like, the water, my body will heat the water all out the window. You're going to freeze.
Absolutely.
After the dive, Gull Dive owners David and Janine Olsen recommend that Linnea buys a dry suit. And so, a few days later on the 1st of November 2020, Linnea arrives at Gull Dive Center ready for her second advanced training dive with a second-hand dry suit that she's bought. She meets other student divers, Bob Gentry, Bob's wife Shannon, who's just going along for the ride but not diving, another girl referred to in court documents as E.G., and Joel Wilson.
By the way, just for those of you following, let me just add some clarity here. So she rented a wetsuit. Too cold. 100% agree. Then she goes to rent a dry suit because she sees that other people diving in the lake that is freezing half dry suits. They were certified and all of that. So she said, hey, can I get a dry suit too? The shop said, no, because you're not certified. You don't have the training. However, you should probably buy one from another person separately. Like we can break the standards, but if you buy it from a private individual, then you're good. Terrible advice.
And not only that, this dry suit course also teaches you how to make sure your dry suit is working. Are the seals good? How do you change the seals?
How to maintain them properly.
Is the vent good? You saw how important that is. Because if it's not sealed properly, not only all the other complexities we've already talked about, but now add flooding into the dry suit,
right?
Which is freezing cold water going inside the dry suit, which could basically make it, once you get to the surface and you try to climb out of the water, you could have hundreds of additional pounds on you.
Yeah, gallons of water
and
inside your suit.
Freezing cold, extra freezing cold, because now you don't have a wetsuit under there. All those thermal protection clothing
they don't work when they're wet.
So it's accelerates your freezingness.
It's terrible.
So if she would have flooded that from a used dry suit, Oh my goodness.
Now, look, I feel like when it comes to rebreathers, the second-hand market is really good. It's not perfect, but is really good at not selling rebreathers to uncertified divers. Like, I see the rebreathers for sale online. Like, oh, I'm selling my whatever rebreather here. It will be like, I will only sell it to a certified diver on the rebreather. Should that be the case with dry suits too? Like, I don't think a lot of dry suits come up for sale. I think more rebreathers are up for sale than dry suits. But I feel like if I were to sell one of my dry suits, I would only sell it to someone who's certified.
Absolutely.
Right.
Easy
But I don't
answer.
think that's the case. I think that a lot of dry suits, I mean, you can buy a dry suit on Amazon, I bet.
Yeah.
Like, there's no control. It's like you just order it comes to your house and you go diving. They don't care. Whereas a rebreather,
remember,
you can't.
She doesn't know anything about a dry suit.
I understand.
She's relying, whether you agree or not.
Yeah.
She's asking advice. Hey, this is really too cold for me. I'm the shop. I'm the expert.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you go buy a dry suit used?
Complete
That-
negligence.
Right there.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
They're doomed right there.
That's
That's
absurd.
unacceptable.
Yeah.
Their instructors, Deborah Snow and Seth Liston, give them a short briefing and then the group depart on a 3-hour drive to Lake McDonald. On the drive, Bob and Linnea discuss their previous dives and Linnea's passion for marine biology. The group arrives at Lake McDonald and starts kitting up. Linnea is excited to try out her new dry suit and even more excited that she'll be warm on the dive. She finishes getting kitted up and is ready to go in the water when she stops to ask Bob about the low-pressure inflator connector on the chest of her dry suit. Bob, having recently completed a dry suit specialty course, lets her know that's where her dry suit inflator hose connects, but the second-hand dry suit doesn't have the accompanying hose. This low-pressure hose must be screwed into your regulator. The hose coupling then connects to your dry suit so that you can inflate the dry suit as you descend and neutralize that air volume. Inflating the dry suit acts to neutralize or balance the air volume in the suit, which also acts to balance your buoyancy. And so when Linnea asks Deborah Snow, her instructor, what she should do, Deborah says that she can simply use her BCD to control her buoyancy.
Okay. I have to pause it here. Forget about the discussion of should you control your buoyancy from the BC or from the dry suit. Let's talk about what the real reason is for adding air inside the dry suit as you go down. This dry suit, as you go down, is going to compress. So imagine this dry suit skin, outer skin shell, squeezing you more and more and more as you go down.
Yep.
If you don't add air to it, it could squeeze you to the point of suffocation. There's no limit. It's going to squeeze you to like a python, a constrictor.
No. And people, who are not divers, they understand vacuum sealing, right? It's the same principle. So think of it, if you've seen the bags where you can pack your clothes and then vacuum seal it and how it compresses everything to a pancake. Imagine that, but with your body.
Imagine that. Now, I would say for me, how deep could I go? And I'm not suggesting anybody to test this. In fact, don't. But I'm asking myself, just from times, because I like to keep my dry suit a little tight. That's my own preference, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I could handle the pain or even breathe deeper than 33 feet, the first atmosphere, which is the greatest percent of pressure change. Every atmosphere decreases the percent of pressure change by half the pressure change differential from the previous atmosphere.
Yeah.
Boyle's Law. I'm telling you, after 33 feet, I don't think I could take it. I don't know if I could make it to 33 feet. I want you to remember that as we go through this. I would have to add air. I'm squeezing to death.
Yeah.
I'm going to be bruised or even not able to breathe.
Yeah, so let me just explain this in layman terms, because you talked about atmospheres there. So when you start your dive, you have barely enough air. Well, let me back up for a second. As you descend, and we get this question a lot, it's like, how can you guys hold the pressure, crushing pressure at 100 feet? Like, it must destroy your bodies. No, the Boyle's law, which is the law that explains how gas compacts or compresses as you go down underwater, only applies to gases. Our bodies, blood, bones, whatever, you don't feel anything. You can be 100 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet, doesn't matter. You don't feel the difference, okay? So the pressure in our bodies doesn't really affect us. Only the crevices in our bodies that are filled with air, like our sinuses and stuff like that. So your ears, for example, you have air in your ears. That's where you feel that ear pain when you go to the bottom of the pool. All right, long story short, you start with some air in your suit. You don't start with a balloon like you saw previously in this video where you're a balloon and you're going down. You start with minimal air. The suit, actually, one of the first steps that you do before you go underwater is you go down and you squeeze all the air out of your suit. So you have barely enough air in there that you couldn't squeeze out yourself, okay? So you start with a minimum amount of air. Like Woody mentioned, you go down to 10 meters or 33 feet. That amount of air, which was already the minimal, will be squeezed by half.
And when you do squeeze out all of that air, and you have a dry suit on with all this thermal protection underneath you and a BC that I assume has integrated weight pockets like the more modern ones, you need to do a new weight check. That's not going to be the same amount of weight you would have for a wetsuit. It's going to be more weight.
Yeah.
And typically we want to do that to where you're, a lot of times the weight check it's only to like mid-eye level. Like when you exhale, when you inhale, you're floating at eye level. And then when you exhale, you're starting to sink. Typically on this one, when you inhale and you're in a dry suit, kind of want the water maybe even to be a little bit more. Like you'd want to be a little bit more heavier than you would be because you're more buoyant. You've got all this thermal protection on. So that's really important that you get the weight check done properly in a dry suit.
Yeah.
That's different amount of weight than you would use in a wetsuit. But don't just shove a bunch of weight in a brand new dry suit person or they're not going to be able to ascend.
Yeah. The reason why Woody said that he doesn't think he can hold it, like be able to sustain it at 33 feet or at 10 meters is because, again, going back to the example of the vacuuming, imagine you have a bag, one of those packing bags that you can vacuum out, and you put clothes in there or whatever, a comforter or whatever, and then you squeeze all the air out manually as much as you can. All right, now take that is already squeezed, compacted, and now stick a vacuum on it and take half the air out of it. That stuff is like,
it's terrible.
So imagine that to your body, to your human body. And that's what Woody's question is like, would I be able to hold it like that? Man, that's tough.
I don't think
33 feet is tough.
Divers wear a BCD or buoyancy control device to control their buoyancy. At the surface, it's inflated so you float at the surface without having to waste energy swimming to stay afloat. Then to descend, you deflate your BCD and make your descent. As you descend, you add small amounts of air into your BCD to neutralize the buoyancy. When you reach your dive depth, you fine-tune your buoyancy. The right amount of air in your BCD means that you float weightlessly. And at the end of your dive, you let air out of your BCD as you ascend. Much like a dry suit, as you ascend, the air in your BCD will expand, creating positive buoyancy, which will start to pull you up to the surface. To control the rate of your ascent, you let small amounts of air out of your BCD. Shannon Gentry, Bob's wife who's not diving, double checks with the instructors as if to question the answer.
You sure
but
she
Linnea
doesn't need a
speaks up
host?
first and says, if they say it's all right, I guess I'll be okay. The group of divers are all qualified, and so the instructors forego the customary pre-dive safety checks and dive briefing. They enter the water at 1700 just as the light is starting to fade. The divers don't have torches, and so they must rely on ambient light.
Like how much can you...
So listen, non-divers, we do a buddy check, and we do a pre-dive sort of checklist. Everybody's got a different mnemonic for it. Not here to argue which mnemonic's better. There is a mnemonic where you go through a 4 or 5 step process to make sure
that you're ready
everything's functioning. This is your life support equipment on your body. Do I understand Gus's? Does he understand mine? We're a buddy team. We take care of each other underwater. We take care of ourselves underwater. And is our gear working? To skip that problem was just created. It was just created. The whole incident would have been avoided if the proper dive check was done 4 somebody wearing a dry suit.
Now,
right?
we have rules for cave diving, and I don't think that we have the equivalent rules for open circuit diving. Of course, there's the number one rule of diving is don't hold your breath. But if there was a rule number 2 is never start your dive with a known problem. That's a very common rule of diving and cave diving. Don't start your dive with a known problem. You already have a problem with your gear, don't start your dive. But how do you know if you have a problem if you don't do a check? Like, what kind of instructor, and I'm glad you used air quotes at the beginning, would start a training dive without checking if there is a known problem?
This is mind-boggling. It really is. This one's really disturbing.
Deborah Snow takes Linnea and EG down to 16 feet. They're there for 5 minutes when Snow takes EG back to the surface. The air in Linnea's dry suit is squeezed a little tight, but she's not yet uncomfortable enough to call off the dive that she drove 3 hours to make. And Deborah Snow hasn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. Now, instructor Seth Liston, who's acting as the safety diver, descends along with students Bob Gentry and Joel Wilson. Deborah Snow comes back down with EG. Altogether, the group descend to 60 feet. They stop on a ledge. Bob Gentry notices that Linnea is looking very uncomfortable. She's trying to signal to Snow or Liston, the 2 instructors on the dive, that something's wrong. Unable to get their attention, she turns to Bob. Bob immediately swims in her direction, but before he can reach her, Linnea loses her balance and slips off the ledge. Bob rushes after her, and by the time he catches her at 85 feet, he can see that her dry suit is squeezing her body to the point that she can't draw a breath.
So how much would it do? Can you do the math really quick?
It's
85
about
feet.
almost 4 atmospheres. Look, not 99 feet
Yeah.
is 4 atmospheres. That means the air is 4 times more constricted than it would be at the surface. Inverse would mean that air will expand 4 times
Right.
as you go up to the surface. So it's squeezing that air down
Yeah.
to 4 times more dense
Yeah. So in
than
our
it would
example,
be at the surface. Approximately, it's roughly maybe 3.5 on that one. or
in
something
our
like that.
example of packing, plugging in a vacuum on it to make a vacuum seal, imagine sucking out, imagine
she
4
breathed.
times less air in it. Just
I don't know how she was breathing, or not severely cut, bruised, or already not able to breathe. I really don't think I could breathe. Your whole lung, chest cavity, everything is squeezed. I mean, I can't make it past 33 feet. I already told you that.
Bob's training kicks in and he reaches for her BCD inflator. He wants to inflate her BCD to make her positively buoyant and help her float up to the surface. But her BCD is already fully inflated and she's still sinking. His next move is to drop her weight belt.
Okay.
If he can drop the weight belt, she'll be lighter, and then he can swim her up to the surface assisted by the air in his own BCD. He reaches for her stomach to find the quick release buckle on the weight belt, but there's no quick release. There's no weight belt.
Well, where are the weights? Normally,
she's clearly super heavy.
most modern BCDs have an integrated weight pocket. It's a pocket, just like it sounds like. Weights are in it. You clip it in. And most of them are pretty much the same. They're right there on the, and you learn and check, are your weights clipped in properly? Here's mine, here's yours. That's part of the pre-dive check. Because if somebody was, God forbid, overweighted to the point where they're sinking to that level, I could grab those 2 weights and ditch them.
Right.
And I've got them, and I'm holding them. And I would assume that would have helped her ascend, right? I don't know.
Ditching weights it's so rare in scuba because the weights are supposed to just counter the positive buoyancy from all your gear. So even when you have an emergency, you should be able to swim up. Our BCDs are rated. When you buy a BCD, they tell you what the lift power of the BCD is, and it comes in pounds. So it will say 30 pounds of lift, 35 pounds of lift, 45 pounds of lift. They come in, depending on the size of the bladder that grabs air, it has a a lift capacity, right? So assuming she had one that was like 30-pound lift capacity, the fact that it was fully inflated and still couldn't get her off the ground, like how much
That means
weight?
it's more than 30 pounds, which
Insane.
Look, I'm going to tell you, for me, and everybody's different. If I'm wearing my dry suit, in the ocean,
Yeah.
with a normal BCD, I'm probably going to be about 15 or 16 pounds total.
Okay.
Normally, I would dive between 8 and 10 pounds in a 5 mil wetsuit in the ocean. If I have a dry suit with an undergarment, I'm probably I'm probably about 1.5 times the weight that I would be using if I was in a wetsuit. For me, it's different for everybody. That's why you got to do this weight check.
Right.
With the dry suit.
Yep. So I checked. I don't have weighting for salt water, which is odd. I only have wet.
That's what I
wet
wear.
diving in open ocean salt water. But in the cave, when I'm diving the rebreather, I have 0 pounds on a dry suit. So no weights.
Well,
because I have twin LP50s.
Exactly. You have steel tanks.
My
So
steel
it depends on the gear, but I'm normally in the ocean, for this example, diving a aluminum 80.
Right.
And if I'm just comparing it, I happen to know, because I've done it, because I'm a wimp, the difference between a 5 mil with an aluminum 80 for me, which I'm 8 to 10 pounds in that. In my dry suit, I'm telling you, I'm normally probably 14, maybe
I'm probably
16
about the same,
pounds
14, 16.
with a thermal undergarment, a medium level of undergarment in the dry suit. I'm setting that up because I don't know what they did for her weight. It shouldn't be that much more.
Let's see it.
Linnea and Bob are still descending. Bob knows some BCDs have quick release weight pockets integrated into the BCD, so he feels for the quick release. He can feel some weights in the BCD, but there's no quick release. Bob's out of options. They're at 104 feet when the regulator drops out of Linnea's mouth. Bob's been breathing heavily and now he's running out of air. Before he gets dragged down further, he lets go of Linnea to make his own emergency ascent. He's out of his depth and he needs help. He gets to the surface and looks for someone to help, but there's no surface support. Deborah Snow surfaces after noticing that 2 divers are missing. Bob and Shannon explain that Linnea is still underwater and can't surface. Snow descends briefly to look for Linnea, but can't see her in the dimly lit waters. The rest of the group surface. Snow and Liston change their tanks and make another dive.
Here's why I paused it here. I know we're pausing this one. Go if you want to watch this video without us. Go ahead. Go to the title. You don't need to.
The description.
You don't need to rip us apart. We told you we're going to pause this.
Yeah.
I'm now asking myself, what went right? Forget the question anymore of what went wrong. Everything. I'm trying to figure out what went right.
Yeah.
Did one single thing from the very, very, very moment of putting their gear on go right? No. Nothing went right. They didn't even do a pre-dive check. Nothing was done correctly. Nothing. So my reaction is, what went right? I mean, I don't need a court to tell me, did anything go wrong? It's unbelievable.
Crazy.
I feel so bad for her. She was doomed from the start.
Find Linnea's body at 128 feet. Unable to pull her up, they have to remove her BCD in order to lighten the load and bring her to the surface. At the surface, they're not in range of a mobile phone tower. A couple who have seen the accident volunteer to drive 30 minutes to the nearest tower in order to get a signal and make an emergency call. Deborah Snow then removes Linnea's dive computer and doesn't give it to investigators. She also removes Linnea's course paperwork, which shows the progression of the course. Linnea's BCD is later recovered. Lead weights in the pockets of Linnea's dry suit and BCD totaled 44 pounds of weight. For me to make the same dive, I would have around 22 pounds of lead, and I'm significantly larger than Linnea. In a debriefing after the event, Janine Olson, one of the owners of Gold Dive, speaks with Bob Gentry and points out that he is the person diving with Linnea, and so he should take responsibility for not saving Linnea's life.
Just again, to give people a visual of how outrageous that is. Even if you're not a diver, you probably have been to a gym. Okay? So think of the big plates that we use when lifting weights, like bench press, whatever. They are 20 kilogram plates.
Wow.
So they basically imagine now her on the surface of the water, and somebody handed her a 45-pound, 20 kilogram plate. Here, go at it. Hold this and go diving. And by the way, you can't ditch it.
I may be willing to try this with you.
What?
If we get in you and I together, maybe like Blue Grotto or something, where we know the platform's right there. I'm going to put a dry suit on. I am going to hook up a hose. We're going to make it safe. But you're going to put 44 pounds
I don't
in
even
me.
think we own 44
I
pounds
want
of
you
it.
to, and then take me safely. You're going to hold on to me. You're going to bring me down to that first platform, only
20
at
feet.
20 feet.
Yeah.
And say, okay, go to the surface. And I'm not going to.
I don't think you can.
Would I be able to do it?
Dude, like, just think about that.
I don't think so.
It's so insane.
I don't think I could get to the surface.
Now, I do want to point out the last comment that he made, that the owner of the shop, which, by the way, we know a lot of shop owners. A lot of shop owners are great. A lot of them are terrible people, okay, in the dive industry. I'm just going to be flat out about that. They're bad, just terrible people. This guy is an example of that. I don't know if you heard what he said, but the student, not an instructor, the student that in my eyes was the hero here, trying to save Linnea as she was sinking to the bottom, putting his own safety on the line to try to save a life. He could have died trying to do this. The owner of the shop said, it's actually your fault for not saving her properly. Like, where do we go from here? Like, this guy, like, it's unbelievable.
That's back to my question. What went right? What is there anything right?
Now, look, we already established that, in my opinion, this guy, Bob Gentry, was a hero. Even though he couldn't save her, he needs to live with that for the rest of his life. The fact that if I would have done it this way, I could have done it that way. Even though he wasn't guilty here, he is guilty mentally, I think. I would be. If I try to save somebody and I couldn't and that person died, I don't care how many psychiatrists, psychologists you line up to tell me that you did everything you could, I think mentally, myself, I wouldn't be able to forgive myself. Like, I would be like, that was on me. So this guy already has to live with that. But the question is, if we can put ourselves, and anyone who's a diver watching this, put yourself in that position where you're with somebody who's getting squeezed to death and you're sinking rapidly on a lake that we already established is 400 plus feet deep, and you're just going down. What will you do differently? Like, you already tried to inflate the BCD, fully inflated. That lift capacity is not working. You try to let go of weights, nothing. All the weights are stuffed in pockets, not on quick releases or belts that you can easily remove. Stuffed in pockets, unable to drop them. What would you do differently?
I'm not going to answer that.
Wow.
And the reason is, it's very easy for me to sit here in this chair and tell you, look, this is what I would have done.
No.
I would tell you that I don't want to answer it because he was willing to give up his life to try to save her.
Amazing.
And he gave it probably all he had. So I'm not here to second guess him at all.
People
What I am here to say is that the professionals, from the dive shop to the instructors, were, I don't know what they were ultimately
Would you say that was
with.
Gross negligence?
Yes.
I mean,
gross
negligence.
to the point of, like, just, I mean, on the verge of criminal. I mean, I'm not a attorney and where does that cross over? But
do you think that getting a hold of a diver and inflating your own BCD could have helped? For example,
obviously, I know
we don't know if you try that.
Would I
saying.
grab you? Would I inflate my BC and try everything I had, which he
your
probably
Drysuit.
did. Right. He probably. I'm assuming he tried. He tried everything possible. Yeah. You know, all of those things could help, but
he could have.
I'm not here to second guess him. I'm just here to say that this was terrible by these professionals. They basically killed her.
When questioned, Janine Olsen tells the coroner that Linnea's dive buddy witnessed her panic, then fall passively to the bottom of the lake after swimming without difficulty at a depth of approximately 40 feet. Luckily, Bob Gentry's GoPro was able to give an unbiased account of the event. To understand the incompetence on this dive, you also need to know that Deborah Snow was only recently qualified as an instructor. She wasn't qualified to teach drysuit diving and quite obviously didn't grasp the basic idea of a drysuit needing an inflator hose. I've taught in reputable dive centers myself, and I can tell you that newly qualified instructors are seldom left to their own devices. Good dive centers make use of an experienced head instructor to oversee diving operations and guide newbie instructors. Given that Janine Olsen tried to mislead the investigation, there's little doubt that there was no guidance at all. In fact, in 2019, Gull Dive rented faulty equipment to an unqualified diver who died as a result. At the time Linnea died, an ongoing lawsuit was still pending against Gull Dive for that incident. The Mills family filed a lawsuit against Gull Dive, Deborah Snow, and Paddy, which was settled out of court. Paddy have since made changes to training standards, but the professional diving community have some serious doubts about how Paddy protects itself without proactively taking an interest in how those standards are enforced in their member dive centers around the world.
So basically what happened is when all this stuff came out, Paddy, instead of supporting Debbie Snow, which was a certified Paddy instructor, they immediately went into trying to get out of it. Like, let me prove to you what the instructor did wrong so you don't hold us liable. And they got criticized for this. And what I mean by it is, in this case, obviously, the instructor in the shop, they did everything wrong. We already established that. But what I mean by it is, it seems like these agencies, not just Paddy, because I think regardless of the agency name, they would have acted the same way. Seems like these agencies, their first line of defense is, let's go find the loophole. Let's go find what the instructor did wrong so we are not held liable. And if this was an incident where, again, was the opposite. We already established on this one they did everything wrong. But in an incident where they did everything right. They followed the standards. They had competent instructors. They checked. They did everything perfectly. They followed the standards. The agencies won't come out and say, okay, you followed the standards. We will put our lawyers on the line. We will support you. We will, you're a exemplary member of us, of our community, and we will back you up. That's not necessarily what happens. I think the agencies are more into, let's do everything we can to show how we're not liable.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair criticism. I think that is they should be there for their member instructors.
Right. If I'm following the standards, dude, back me up if something went wrong. Like, I followed the standards,
It does, though, still get back to my very, very original thought of I'm not sure exactly where Paddy themselves is at fault in this incident. And I think they probably, I don't know how much, but I think they did step up in terms of paying a settlement.
I don't think they had a choice. They got sued and they had to.
But
they settled out of court.
But what did they, again,
Here's
lots of comments are going to come from this. I don't know exactly where their fault came in. What point should Paddy have been able to prevent this? I mean, were they there? Know. Were they there on the shore when the pre-dive check wasn't done? Like, I don't know. That's a really big discussion.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the agencies are all trying to figure that same thing out.
I get it. I understand. Now, interestingly enough, even though they settled out of court, so Patty paid, I'm sure Gold, whatever, their insurance companies, etc., paid for this. The instructor, who was the main person responsible and who was basically responsible for the safety of all the students, walked out of it. Like, there was no repercussions. Of course, we already saw in the video that she was removed by Patty. So she lost the ability to teach under Patty. But there was nothing criminally responsible that they could find for this instructor. Now, there's a push right now. And again, it all depends when you're watching this, because you may be watching this in the future and there's already more information. And if so, put an update below. But there is some information that they're trying to reopen the investigation to pursue criminal charges, specifically negligent homicide by Debbie Snow. Now, I looked it up because we're both not lawyers. I looked up what negligent homicide is, and this is what I found on Wikipedia, where everything is true. Negligent homicide is a criminal charge brought against the person who, through criminal negligence, allows another person to die. So then I was like, well, what is criminal negligence? Yeah. So I want to read that to you. In criminal law, criminal negligence is an offense that involves a breach of an objective standard or of behavior expected of a defendant. So again, I think the best example is this, and I'm going to ask you this because you seem like a reasonable person, and this includes reasonable person. It says, the degree of culpability.
You said seem. I thought maybe.
The degree of culpability is determined by applying a reasonable person standard. And again, this is where you come in. Criminal negligence becomes gross when the failure to foresee involves a wanton disregard for human life. So, you, as a reasonable person, if I ask you, based on everything you heard about what happened, do you think that Debbie Snow in this case showed or is responsible for criminal negligence?
If I was sitting in that jury room, I think I would ask all of my other fellow jurors one question. If this incident doesn't fit the definition here that you just read me of criminal negligence, I simply ask one question. What does? What more could you possibly do to say that this is criminal negligence? What more would you have to do to reach that threshold? I mean, you didn't even do a pre-dive check. You're an instructor. Step one. Mm-hmm. What more would you have to have the ability to foresee a disregard for human life when you're the instructor and they're in specialty gear and you didn't even do a pre-dive check? Is that not a disregard for human life? I mean,
complete disregard for standards.
Unforesee that could potentially be a risk that this human being is wearing brand new specialty gear. So what more? My question's it's really a question back. What if this doesn't fit that definition?
Yeah.
Somebody tell me what example does.
Yep, and I think that the reason why it's tough to prove is this. So it's saying there's 3 types of tests that they do to establish this. Number 1, it says it's a subjective test where they attempt to establish what the accused was actually thinking at the time of the incident.
Very hard.
Very hard to prove.
Very hard threshold.
Then there's an objective one. It says where they're asking if a reasonable person with the same general knowledge and abilities as the accused who have done that.
That's a problem.
So it's not a normal person. It's a person that is of the same background. So another dive instructor. Would another dive instructor do what this person did?
No. I think the vast majority, I think that one's a big problem for him. And remember, this one is different than typical crime where there was intent. It's not saying you intended to hurt this person.
Of course.
It doesn't matter if you intended to or not. So the first one that you read is tough.
Yeah.
The second one to me is big problem for the defendant. And what's the third one?
It just says a hybrid where
the
they
test
can
is
use
both
both.
subjective and objective.
Right. What
So-
were you thinking? Because this is what you did, and you use both.
What was the accused actually thinking? I mean,
And whether that is reasonable to
probably thinking, this isn't a big deal. I don't want to have to unwind this. She drove 3 hours. I'll be able to deal with it. It sounds like that's what this instructor was thinking, being lazy. Like, I don't, whatever.
We're going to go
you
shallow.
really need a hose. Yeah, we're just going to go shallow anyway. And if that was the case, if they can prove that's what she was thinking,
Yeah.
you got a guilty verdict.
Criminal
You
negligence.
can't be thinking that.
Well,
Anyway,
we'll
just
see how
second
this plays out in the future. But you mentioned that dry suits are specialty equipment, which I agree with you. And we already talked about how you don't have to be an expert diver to get trained. You can get trained very early on a dry suit. It was actually my second. I think I did perfect buoyancy was my first specialty, and then dry suit within like a month of being certified, because I wanted to go dive in Iceland. But the point is, there is a lot of specialized equipment that should be approached the same way. That you shouldn't just order one out of Amazon and go diving because you think you're cool and let me just buy a DPV online and let me go and start DPVing around. There's a lot of specialty equipment that can really put you at risk. One of those things is a full face mask. And we reacted a while ago about a video, that I'm glad this was all captured on video, of a diver that had a full face mask. They were down to like 100 feet, and then the full face mask failed, and they lost it. They panicked immediately. No attempt was done to go back to their octo or anything like that. It was so sketchy. Very, very sketchy, and I'm going to leave it right here so you can take a look. But there you go. We react to Linnea Mills' terrible, terrible situation. I feel horrible for her family and her friends. Such a preventable situation.
Yeah, this was a really tough one. It's really, really tough to watch this and now know really clearly all of the things that went wrong. In fact, what went right? I've asked in that video what actually went right from the very beginning. This is terrible by everybody. It's a tough one.